Hello everybody, welcome to Virtual Technical Lecture channel. By this video, I am going to demonstrate and lecture about REST API security. So what is REST API? The REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It is a simple way of communication between the client and the server. The advantages of REST APIs are it is a simple approach of communication, and it is lightweight, and it is highly scalable, and it provides us with high performance. Pillars of REST API. The REST API's pillars are the request that the client makes to perform some operation on the server, and the response that the server sends back to the client. So the request comprises with the endpoint, the HTTP request methods such as get, put, post, or delete. So the CRUD operations are mapped against the HTTP request method. The create is mapped against the post, and read is mapped against get, update is mapped against put or post, and delete is mapped against delete. And to perform the operations, the client would be sending the data either as a request parameter or as part of the request body in a JSON format. And to access and secure REST API, the authentication details or the API key are sent as part of the HTTP request header. And the response is very simple. It is the outcome of the operations which has been performed at the server, which is written back in the form of JSON. And along with the response, the HTTP status is also sent back. That will say the outcome of the operation, whether it has got passed or got failed. Following are the vulnerability of the REST API. When REST API is not protected, it may lead an attacker to gain access to it, and it will compromise the access of an actual application user, and it is vulnerable in introducing malicious code, and it also causes distributed denial of service when an attacker sends too many requests, and it is vulnerable to man in the middleman attack, and hence it's required to have the security implementation for the REST API. So these are the standards which is usually adapted. One is validating the messages sent by the client, and second is ensuring the communication channel is encrypted, and third is using advanced hashing techniques in case sensitive informations are shared between client and server, and input data validations are performed, and API is either um, access protected via token or via username and password, and additionally with the authorization. The following authentication and authorization strategies are usually adapted. One is basic authentication, wherein for a client to access the REST API, they will have to supply their username and password and send it across via the HTTP request header, which would be then read by the server, and only if that username and password is valid, the users are allowed to access the API. And on top of it, after authentication, the server can implement any authorization techniques to either allow or disallow the operations requested by the client. Next is token authentication, wherein the user doesn't require to supply username and password for each time he is accessing the API. I'm sorry, he or she. So for the first time, when the user is authenticated, a token is sent across to user, and following that, the user or the client would be accessing the API via this token. An API key, again, this is also generated by the server and given back to the client in the secured fashion, and the client would be making the REST API calls via this API key. So That is what I had explained. And here I'm going to demonstrate about basic authentication. But although it is not a recommended approach, I had implemented that to make our hands dirt and understand the REST API security implementation in a easier way. Okay, so let me tell what all the let me open a notepad plus plus. So I have created a simple REST API. So with the following components. One is my backend is H2. This will be acting as a database layer, and my persistence layer would be JPA, and my REST API would be done via boot REST controller, and the REST API authentication and authorization is performed via LDAP authentication. LDAP authentication. So for to do this LDAP authentication, I have used Open LDAP server, which is hosted on GCP. Okay, that's all. So quickly, let's get into the configurations of my simple REST application. So application.property. The one which I'm going to highlight now is all related to the database configuration, including this one, completely this one. So all this relates to the database configuration, and all this relates to the LDAP authentication configuration, which will give the Open LDAP server IP and all the required other parameters, which I would explain later. Okay, let me quickly explain what all the users created in LDAP, and what all the roles which has been created for them. So if you take LDAP, in Open LDAP server, the user informations are stored in a form of a tree, like the structure which I am highlighting now. Okay, so this would be the base DN, which is called as distinguished name. Under the base DN, I have an organization unit called people, under which the users are added. And this is called the user search base. And there is one more organization unit which is called as roles, and this is called the group DN or role DN, role distinguished name, under which the roles of the users are mapped. Each user would be identified by this distinguished DN, and this distinguished DN is added as a unique member to each of the role. So, and to access this directory information tree, we need an user. So base DN user, which is called as manager DN, and that password need to be configured on the application.property, which has been already configured. So let me quickly show you now. So, so this is these two properties configures the administrator of the base DN. This is required to configure because this with this only with this user we can traverse through the directory information tree. And this is the user search base, and this is the group search base, and within the user search base, this is the user search filter. The user ID is used as a unique attribute to identify an user, and group search filter, we are using two attribute. One is an group of unique names, and the other one is the unique member. So after the user has been bound, that bound user would be searched inside this group search filter to get the role of the user. So all this happens behind the scenes. Only thing what we'll have to do, what we'll have to instruct the Spring Security is that create a web security config with at configuration, and under this we'll have to create a bean which returns back a security filter chain. So in this security filter chain, I am instructing the Spring Security to follow HTTP basic authentication and then authorize all the requests except the one highlighted here, right? The one which is I'm showing, which is commented out, I'll explain you later. But as of now, it is configured that way. Okay. So all our API requests are authenticated except this URL. And here I'm disabling my CSRF token. All that has been disabled because a REST API authentication should be a stateless. I need to make some more configuration also to make it stateless, but I'm making it very light. Okay, so and then I'm returning back this object, that is the security filter chain object. So based on that, Spring Security will inject a basic authentication for the user. And if when we say the basic authentication, only thing the Spring Security will do is it will read the username and the password from the respective HTTP request header. Okay, so but on against which this username and password has to be validated, whether it is going to be a database or it is going to be a LDAP server, that we'll have to instruct the security, Spring Security. So that instruction comes within this method. So here I say that perform a LDAP authentication with a given configuration. All this configuration maps to a properties in the application dot properties, whatever I have explained before. So with all this, the REST API is secured actually. Okay. First, let me explain about the authentication. And I have written a LDAP REST controller, one special REST API, which would pick up the username and their roles actually. So I have auto wired this user context facade to the REST controller constructor, and that user facade, user context facade is just getting the username from the Spring Security. See here, this is the method. So we get an authentication object, right? From the authentication object, we get the name of the user, which is set to the user context, and we get the roles of the user via get authorities. So the authority is an object which stores the roles of the user, so which is called as granted authority. So so here I am creating a list of string which will add the roles of the users, and user can possess multiple roles, and hence it is implemented as the list of authorities. So this authorities is mapped against the roles of the user. Okay, so quickly if we check here before demonstrating that API, so these are the users and these are the roles of each user. So Adam possesses the lecturer role, Rajesh possesses the learner role, and Rajaraman and Saravanan possess the teacher role. That's all. So now this API helps to understand what are the roles each user has. So I have created a user called Vijay Kumar without any roles. So this is to demonstrate user without any role is not authorized to access any REST API. Okay. So this one, and again, if I put this role called Adam, I will set up the password to be same so that my demonstration is easier. So he possesses the role of lecturer, and if you use this user, he is possessing the role of teacher, and this user is possessed the role of learner. So all this are there actually. Okay. So this user context facade is automatically wired. Okay. And now this is just to demonstrate that. Now I have created three REST APIs, one to find all the courses. So to find all the courses, and user with any role can do this, but he should have a relevant role. Add course is allowed only for the I have designed that way that add courses allowed only for lecturer and teacher and trainer, and find course is for all, and delete course is only for the user with lecturer role. So how are we going to map this? Okay, how is it happening? So when you write a service class, when you write your web security config, you will have to instruct your Spring Security with an annotation at enable method security. Why at enable method security is required? At enable method security is required to control access to the service methods. So your service methods are nothing but the operations which are being called from the REST API from your controller. So, for example, if you take our REST controller, the find courses. So this is the one. So when the find courses are called, course service dot find course is called. So over here, I annotate as at secured and say what are the roles who can access the find courses. So it's a simple way of making it via annotations, and Spring Security does all the magic in the background. So, and again, if you come back to our controller, if you go to add course, like adding a new course. So when you come to this implementation, only the user with these roles can add a course. User with a learner role cannot add a course. Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm marking this one. So this is the one. So here the learner role is not there, and user with a learner role cannot add a course. And if you come back to our remove courses, so we call the remove courses, and only the user with the role of lecturer can remove a course. Now I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm stopping the server. I'm just running back again. Okay, now the REST API. So let's do find all courses. Okay, so now Rajesh as a learner can access all the courses, can view all the courses. See, but an user without any role cannot access this. That's all. He cannot. So there is no boilerplate code required to write on your service layer. It's all been handled by the simple annotations. Okay, and now let me access this with a different user, and you'll be able to get all the courses. Let me now add a course. Now learner cannot add a course. So Rajesh, let me submit this request with Rajesh. So one more thing, this is the basic authentication which I'm performing, and behind the scenes the postman would send this parameter base 64 encoded via the request headers. Okay. So now I'm Rajesh is a learner and he cannot add a course. So I'm submitting. See here, he is forbidden to add a course. But when I access this with a person with teacher role, I would be able to access it. So person with teacher role is here. So I'm accessing with this user. Of course, they can. So now this is a response actually. Okay, so now if you check your body, I'm going to create this course with this user. So as he is a teacher role, he is allowed to do that. So and course is created. So HTTP status is 201 created. So this is what the response. And if you check find all courses again, when I submit with the learner Rajesh, now he could see that new course. Yes. Now let me try remove this course with an user called the same Saran. So he's a teacher. The teacher doesn't have access to the teacher doesn't have access to see here only lecturer can remove the course. So let me now submit this. No, forbidden. So now let me try with another user. Teacher we have tried. Learner, let's try. Learner, let's try. Learner, no. Access should not be given. No. And then let's try with this one more teacher role and one more without any roles. No, they cannot. So now only user who can access is the lecturer. So Adam is a lecturer. So now when I submit the request, so I'm responding back with the same object which is deleted. Now when you see find all courses, by the learner, he would not be able to see that. Yes, it's been removed. Okay, so quickly let me demonstrate in one more way. So this is one way wherein we are annotating with at secured. There is another way also. Let me remove this, comment this out quickly, and let me go back to my web security config. Let me comment out this enable method security, and let me add this all these lines. So we can do control our access to the API via our security configuration also. Okay, now let me restart quickly and demonstrate that. Yes. So now we are stopping the access to the API well before it has reached the controller. So previously, until controller, user can reach with a proper username and password. But while accessing the service API, they cannot access it. Now, let me demonstrate the same thing. So now actually let me find all codes. Vijay Kumar should not be, because he doesn't possess any roles. See, so this is another way alternative. And let me try to add a course with the learner role, Rajesh. So now I'm going to add this because now it is, I have restarted the database would be refreshed with the new data, and this data would not be there. Now Rajesh cannot send this request. Yes. And again, when this request is sent by any teacher role, yes, now he could submit the request. Yes, or created, and you can see that courses over here. Sorry, because I'm accessing with the person with who doesn't have any role. That is why. So now I'll give the proper role. Now, if I could access, I would be able to access it. So the Kubernetes basics. This course has been added. Now coming to remove course. Remove course. Only Adam can remove. The rest all. See, this person has a teacher role. They can't remove it. Yes, and I'm one more teacher role. They can't remove it. And then person without any role can't remove it. So only person who can remove that is person with lecturer role. Done. So now if you find all courses, you will not be finding the Kubernetes course. Okay. So that is how this is implemented. So now here we have seen two ways of implementation. One is via the security configuration, and other one is via at security annotation. So basically over here, this is required. And on the core service IMPL, we'll have to write at secure. That's all. So this is a simpler way of demonstration of our Spring REST API, REST API authentication using basic authentication. So the authentication is performed by the Open LDAP server, and the roles are fetched from the Open LDAP server from the directory information tree, and then the operations are access controlled via this REST API configuration. So my next video would be demonstrating about the token based authentication. Thank you all for watching this video. Please subscribe this video, and please put thumbs up when you like this. And thanks for a overwhelming response for my previous video on LDAP authentication. Thanks for that. Please subscribe, and please give your likes when you are happy with this video. Thank you.